Thanks for joining us for another Electric Cooperatives of Arkansas Balance of Power podcast. I'm Maureen Glisovic, and I am now joined by Congressman Bruce Westerman. Good afternoon, Congressman.
Good afternoon. Great to be with you.
Thank you so much. So let's get right into it. Can you tell us what are the main concerns with the United States' current energy policy?
Oh wow, that's a soft lead in there. I'd say there's only two problems with the current U.S. energy policy. It's physics and math. If the Biden administration could figure that out with these utopian goals that they got, then everything would be okay. But I think we're putting way too much emphasis on EVs, and we're not looking at the big picture. I have no problem with EVs. I think they're great technology, and their time will come. But to force people to drive EVs through regulations and through subsidies to car companies, I think is a bad way to approach it. I think we need to look at our generating capacity, the reliability of that, and the reliability of our grid. And then I think a more robust use of EVs would come in the future following that.
Let's talk about what would be an ideal policy from your point of view, especially given the fact of reliability and the grid is very important to make sure we could sustain that.
In the macro view, I say there are three things that we got to focus on energy: reliability, affordability, and clean. And it's there's no reason we can't have reliable and affordable and clean. But if we keep subsidizing different programs and picking winners and losers, I think we're going to end up with none of the above. So we need to utilize the resources that we've got. America's reduced greenhouse gas emissions by implementing natural gas projects more than anybody else in the world has done, and more than any other technology has allowed us to do. So we've got to stop demonizing different kinds of fuel, and we need to make energy that is, again, reliable and affordable, and make it as clean as possible. We need more nuclear energy. We need to stop tearing out dams in our country and removing hydropower that, it's carbon-free energy when you do produce hydropower. And it's basically just putting common sense into place and letting the physics and the math dictate, and the economics versus the political science, which often is the science that rules in DC.
And Congressman, speaking of subsidies, why are we not seeing more for nuclear generation?
Well, people have a bias towards nuclear generation. You'll hear the talk, but then you don't get the walk. And it comes back to the same reason that we're not mining in America, is we don't want it in our backyard. But I tell people all the time, we can build a nuclear submarine and load it up with sailors and send it out into the ocean. And they've got 35 years of fuel on board, where they're also making their own air and making their own water, or purifying the water that they use on the vessel. We've way over-regulated nuclear power. You can see the projects that happened on the East Coast that were way over budget and way over schedule, which translates into high energy costs. I think we should be looking at smaller reactors distributed more widely, so that you're not putting all the stress on the grid by your power generation, and also using more natural gas, and using more hydro, using more biofuels. We have a tremendous amount of biofuels in Arkansas, and biofuels are carbon neutral. And I can make an argument how biofuels can even be carbon negative, meaning that you're sequestering more carbon by sustainably managing forests. We've got to quit going down this road that wind and solar and electric vehicles are the only ticket in town, because there's much smarter ways to approach it than that.
And speaking of going down different paths and different roads, do you believe that the recent U.S. Supreme decision overturning Chevron impacts regulations on the energy industry?
That happened right after the Biden-Trump debate, and the debate was the only thing on the news, but it was one of the biggest news stories of the year and probably one of the biggest Supreme Court decisions we've had in a long, long time. And it basically said that the Constitution says Congress is supposed to make laws, the administration is supposed to enforce laws. We've got into a situation where the administration is not only making laws, they're enforcing the laws and adjudicating the laws. And Chevron says that's not going to be the case anymore because of this bureaucratic creep that's been accomplished under Chevron. We've seen these onerous regulations, and we've seen it become almost impossible to build new projects. So it will take a lot of time to undo what was done under Chevron, but I think it's a very positive step forward going forward in the future.
And let's talk about the realities of what the future could look like as far as our grid. Curtailments, or what some would call rolling blackouts. The realities of that happening, not just in Arkansas, but across the nation. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, it's unnecessary. We have the technology, we have the skills, we have the engineering and construction know-how to totally prevent this from happening. It's a policy issue. And it may have been one that was made many years ago, but when you see a rolling blackout, it's more or less a policy issue. You could have a natural disaster, but you can even, if you design things correctly, you can mitigate the downside effects of natural disasters if you've got a properly designed system and constructed system. But you can design it, but if you can't construct it, then you're no better off than if you didn't even know how to make a system more reliable.
And I wanted to ask you, so with some of these policies that have been put in place, can we just talk about how that is affecting how people can plan and continue to provide for, reliability and affordability and responsible? How are America's electric cooperatives supposed to continue doing that when we're facing just uncertainty and specific policies that some would say are just unachievable?
Well, you all are expected to be miracle workers. And I guess maybe you've got a magic wand over there somewhere, but one of the favorite quotes that I keep going back to is a guy named Aldo Leopold, who happened to graduate from the same forestry school that I did, but many, many years ago. And he wrote that there are two great spiritual dangers of not living on a farm. The first is you think food comes from the grocery, and the second is you think heat comes from the furnace. Now, there was a lot of insight and wisdom to that, and people are out of touch with what it takes to produce energy and to be able to plug your device into the outlet or hit the switch and the lights come on. It's a huge, massive, complex system upstream that remakes that, or that is required to make that energy reliable. When you flip the switch, you expect the lights to come on, and to make it affordable. And it's really amazing what our electric generators and transmission folks and groups like Arkansas Electric have been able to do. And it's taken for granted. It's taken for granted until it's not there. But I mean, y'all are being pushed to your limits, just like every other utility out there. And I work with utilities in the West. They're scared to death because, there was a forest fire and they got sued $2 billion by the state of California. Well, what's going to happen when you fine an electric company $2 billion? Well, they've got to stay in business if people want their power on, so they just pass the cost on to their customers. But it's a situation out there where you can't even go in and clear the right-of-ways to your transmission lines, and then you get fined for a fire that started. There's got to be more common sense put into place, and we got to get past this idea that the electric utilities can just shoulder any kind of burden that we put on them. because at the end of the day, it's going to end up costing the consumer, either costing them in not having reliable and affordable power, or it's going to cost them much more. Well, that gets back into the affordability to be able to flip that switch and have the lights come on.
Congressman, I know that you are busy, always looking out for your constituents and all Arkansans. Is there anything that you would like for Arkansans to know about your efforts and what you're doing to make sure that the lights do stay on?
We've got a lot of blessings in Arkansas. We've got good, reliable, and affordable electricity, which means that that's a big attractant to bringing new economies into the state. But we can't rest on our laurels. We've got to continue to develop that generating capacity, continue to develop that transmission and distribution systems. And we can do it with a lot of the resources that we have right there in the state. I'll be taking a Codell going over to Scandinavia. I've been visiting with some of the ambassadors and officials from Norway and Sweden and Finland. And they've made a really concerted effort into boosting their base power. And a lot of that's been by building nuclear power plants. And as a result, they've got abundant power, and they've got reliable power, and it's affordable, and they're able to attract a lot of industry into those countries. So we've got to create a system where we can do the things that we do best, and so that Arkansas Electric and other utilities across the country can have their hands untied and provide the clean, affordable, and reliable energy that we've come to expect.
Well, Congressman, we want to thank you for your time and joining us here at the Electric Cooperatives of Arkansas's Balance of Power podcast. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.